Welcome to the Refurbishment Mastery podcast with me, Martin Rapley. If you're a property investor who is worried about paying too much for your next property, concerned that you don't know how to manage a refurb, or scared that you will be ripped off by a builder, then this is for you. In this podcast, I share over 30 years of experience of managing refurbishments and conversions to help you make more profit, save your time, and ultimately enjoy the process. On with the podcast. In this episode, I'm going to take you through exactly what a project manager does when they're managing a project. And in reality, if you are managing your own projects, then this is exactly what you should be doing as part of that whole process. I'm also going to explain a little bit as to why the project manager of your project can't realistically be your builder, which is actually something that a lot of property investors say to me, is that they're going to use their builder as their project manager. And I hope by the end of this episode that you'll actually realize and understand why that really isn't the way that it's ever going to work, but certainly why it isn't the best way going forward. So let's look at exactly what a project manager should be doing for your project. And to a certain extent, I'm not talking about anything here that's particularly specialist relating to construction. This is what a project manager would do in any business. And some of you may well be project managers and will agree with everything that I'm saying here. In reality, what I would encourage you to do if you're engaging a project manager is ensure that that project manager has got a construction background. And of course, if you're managing your projects for yourself, then I hope that's why you're listening to this podcast and all of the other episodes, and possibly even getting some other support from me so that I can help you deliver your projects in a more successful way using my construction knowledge and your time to manage your own projects. So let's look at what a project manager should do. First of all, the first thing role of the project manager is to be absolutely, totally clear what is required from the particular project. So what is that end goal? What are we aiming to achieve as far as quality of the building, as far as who is the tenant or the guest or the purchaser going to be at the end of the refurbishment? Exactly what do those people require? There's no point in setting off to refurbish a property if we actually haven't got a good, clear idea as to what we are looking to achieve at the end of the day. My mentor says to me, start with the end in mind. And that is absolutely the right mindset. And this actually comes back to the point before you've even purchased a property. There's no point in purchasing a property unless we know exactly where we want it to end up at the end of the day. So if you engage a project manager, this will be the first part of the conversation you'll have with them so that they've got total clarity as to what you're aiming for. And they may well ask you questions to help you get to the bottom of your goals. And they may even challenge you on some of those things to really be sure that you are going to be delighted at the end of the day. So when you are buying a property, you are immediately stepping into the shoes of a project manager, because you are immediately saying, right, well, once I've bought this property and refurbished it, this is what it is going to look like at the end of the day. This is my end user, my end client, my end tenant. This is what they need. And if I'm going to rent this really, really quickly at the best rents I can within that marketplace, then this is exactly what I need to deliver. And significantly, this is exactly what I don't need to deliver. So we can miss out the things that perhaps are not required. And just as a real basic example in there, for instance, if you were delivering a serviced accommodation holiday type flat, where your market is short term guests, then you may well want to include fully integrated appliances in the kitchen. Whereas if you are delivering a property that's going to be rented to first time renters, or maybe even charity, then you would probably leave a space for a washing machine, a space for a fridge freezer, and maybe not even put in a space for a dishwasher. So that's the very basics. There's lots of other things you could consider there as well, other elements of the project. But the first thing the project manager wants to do is be clear, what are they trying to achieve? What are you trying to achieve at the end of the project? And if you are the project manager, then that's the first thing that you need to be thinking about. Now, to deliver that project, we may well need to bring in some other people. Um, and so the project manager's role then starts moving on to bringing in the right team to deliver that project for us. The team don't necessarily all start on the same day. They come in over the period of the project. One of the early members of that team might be a planning consultant, might be an architect. A little bit later on, after you've got planning, you may need some structural drawing, so you bring in a structural engineer. You may well need to be bringing in a building control surveyor. You may need a party wall survey. You may need some other consultants to help you with environmental issues if you've got a commercial building, for instance. And later on, of course, the big team you're going to bring in is the contractor. So part of the project manager's role is, first of all, to understand the likely team that are going to be needed to deliver the project. And then, of course, helping put together that team as far as finding potential people to be on that team, possibly interviewing them, verifying that they're legitimate, that they can do what you want them to do, getting quotes from them all, comparing those quotes, interviewing them, and making recommendations. So if you're outsourcing the work to a project manager, then you can expect that feedback back to you. But of course, if you are managing the project for yourself, then that's the kind of things that you need to be thinking about. So again, you've started putting your team together really early on. Notice that the last part of the team that I mentioned there is actually the builder. And this is why you can start to see that the builder isn't the best person to project manage your scheme, because the builder comes into the scheme long after it started. The builder will always come into the scheme after you've purchased the property, and yet you've got to carry out this first bit of appraisal to understand what you're aiming for at the end of the day. And significantly, the builder doesn't get involved in the selection and procurement of those early members of the team that are needed. Now, the big job that the builder does, the big job that the project manager does, although you won't necessarily always fully appreciate this, this is a lot of work that goes on in the background. And if you outsource this to a project manager, you may not see any of this going on. But effectively, the project manager will manage everyone involved in the project, all of those people that have been brought into the team. And sometimes back in the day when I was project managing schemes, I'm pretty certain that some of my clients felt like they were paying me money for nothing. Whereas in reality, the reason they didn't feel as though there was anything going on was actually because everything was running smoothly. And so because there were no crisis going on, it wasn't loud and noisy, and we didn't have lots of emails going backwards and forwards. The reason for that was actually because things were running really, really smoothly. And me and my team were steering things at a point that our clients didn't need to know about. So if you've engaged a project manager, subject to an element of trust, of course. You know that they are doing these things. The fact that it's quiet is actually demonstration that they are doing everything that they should be doing. And as a result of you engaging them, you're not involved in problems and crisis, and it doesn't feel super noisy. Now, if you're managing your own project, then this is the key thing here. You need to be talking to everyone within the project that's involved in the project. You need to make sure that when someone says they're going to do something, that they do actually do something. You need to make sure that the right information is passed around the loop, as it were, and the issues are dealt with in a sensible time frame, and with, you know, a realistic outcome. Uh, so to some extent, this goes on to the next thing I'm going to be speaking about. If you imagine a wheel, a bicycle wheel, say, we've got an axle in the middle, and we've got lots of spokes that go out to the outer wheel, the outer tire. Effectively, the project manager, or you, or the project manager and you, are the axle in the middle. And at the end of each spoke are all of these different people involved in delivering the project. Some of them are going to be there pretty much from start to finish. Some of them are going to be there for just a short period, and then they've done their part of the delivery and they'll go. Others will come in later on. Some of them might come in right at the very end. Let's say right at the very end, you may have an interior designer come in and actually stage up your property. Now, they're not going to start their work until 2/3 of the way through the main project. So you can see they can come in a lot later. But by then, you're not likely to be talking to the planning consultant, or perhaps even a structural engineer. So the team actually evolve as the project goes on, and different people come and go. And some people retain an interest, but perhaps don't need to get too involved in a day to day, whereas others are just starting to come in. And the project manager's role is to manage all of these people at the right time. We don't necessarily need to be talking to our interior designer about the color of the paint, whilst we're still talking to our planning consultant about the logistics of getting the planning, or our architect about how we best lay out the spaces. So the project manager's skill is to be talking to the right people at the right time, and in connecting up the right people at the right time, and nothing more than that. When I was working as a building contractor, even further back in my history, I used to be involved with projects, certainly in the early days of emailing, where absolutely everyone that was ever involved in the scheme got copied into every single email that went out. And it became really hard work, because I used to be copied into emails that I had no involvement in. I didn't need to know about some of the contents of those emails. I suspect now people are much better, much more aware of emails, and how that we don't need to copy everyone into everything. But I certainly have been involved in projects where a lot of things have been done on WhatsApp, um, and I've had to very carefully make sure that the right people are in each, in the correct WhatsApp group. So I frequently had a WhatsApp group between myself, my team, and my clients, and that might only be two or three of us. I'd have another group between me, my team, my clients, and the consultants, and then I'd have a completely different group between me, probably my clients, and the builder. So, this is the skill of the project manager, knowing who needs what information, and importantly, who doesn't need information. Because if you're sending information to the wrong people and they continually see information that they don't need, eventually they'll switch off. And then when something that you do send to them is relevant, there is a good chance that they haven't actually acknowledged it or seen it, because they're just seeing too much for want of a better phrase, too much spam, really. Not that it's true spam, but it's spam because it's not relevant for what they're doing. Let's jumping in to make sure that you have everything you need. Now, in a number of these podcasts, you would have heard me talk about my community, and I want to ensure that you know how you can join that community. Obviously, within these podcasts, there's a limit to the detail I can go into the recording, and of course, a lot of things are very generic. So, what if you had access to join me on a Zoom call for 90 minutes every single week in a group coaching environment? You could get your questions answered whenever they come up and learn from other members' questions. Plus, you also get 10 hours of training videos, an HMO refurbishment case study, some sample documents and checklists that will help you run your projects far more effectively. Membership of my community is just £89 a month. You get the first month free, and you can also cancel anytime after that. Plus, as a listener of this podcast, there's a promo code to help you save £20 every single month that you remain a member. So just make a note of VIP discount 20, VIP discount 20, all in capital letters, and put that into the checkout. You'll find the checkout on my website, www.refurbishmentmastery.com. Scroll down the page, you'll find the link for the Project Management Accelerator. Use the promo code VIP discount 20 and you'll be signed up at just £69 a month. I look forward to seeing you in that community very, very soon. Now back to the podcast. Now, as part of managing all of that team that are involved in the delivery of your project, you need to be setting targets. You need to be agreeing targets and managing the delivery to those targets. And of course, again, if you've got an outside source project manager, you may not hear much of this going on. What you will hear is when targets have been missed. But you may not actually hear anything at all because all of the targets have been achieved. If you've got a good project manager, you may never hear anything about the targets. All you'll find is that the project was finished on the day or within the period that was originally agreed for the delivery in the first place. So when you're talking to your consultants, if you're project managing for yourself, make sure you've got some kind of timeline. In fact, it's worth having a timeline for the whole project. But in the early days, that might be quite woolly as you get for the latter parts. But you can certainly set some timelines. When you are talking to an architect about putting together the drawings, agree with them. When will I get the first draft? By the end of next week. Write that down. Make a note of it. Follow it up on Wednesday. Just check in on Wednesday. Just confirming that you said you would send me the first draft of the drawings on Friday. Is that still on track? On track, because I need them to hit the next target. The next target is that I'm going to sign them off over the weekend, feed back to you on Monday so that you can finalize them, because we want to get the planning application in by the end of the following week. So you need to agree these targets with your consultants and then manage them and check in with them to ensure that they're actually delivered. Now, throughout the whole life of the project, there will be a number of challenges that come along. Some of those challenges are going to be fairly minor, but some of them could be quite significant. The first thing we want to do is actually be aware of what those significant challenges could be. We want to consider the risks in the project. Your project manager will put together some kind of risk assessment. So this is not a risk assessment that you may have heard them referred to relating to health and safety, but this is a risk assessment as far as understanding where are the potential challenges with this project. If we've got them out in the open, then when and if things start to bubble towards those problems, they're not a surprise. And we can head them off perhaps before they even become a challenge, or we can change direction to solve them before the challenge gets too major. So you may see that risk assessment. You may not see that risk assessment if you're working with a project manager. Not all project managers will need to share that, but they're dealing with this in the background. And if you're managing your own project, I would encourage you to put together some kind of risk assessment. Anyone that works with me on a one-to-one basis uh, gets my 90-point project management blueprint. And the very first line in that blueprint is to put together a risk assessment. Now, irrespective of how well we put together a risk assessment and we understand the potential challenges, there will always be more problems along the way. And one of the roles, part of the role of the project manager is to understand those problems, understand who needs to get involved in solving those problems and steering that team into the right solution. Now, some of those problems might be really easy to fix because you've got clarity as to what you're aiming to achieve at the end of the project. For even though the builder might ask a question that in the builder's eyes is a problem, because you've got clarity, you may be able to answer that very, very quickly. If you're working with a project manager, some of those problems, the project manager may be able to answer very, very quickly because you have discussed with them exactly what you want to get from the project, and they know within parameters that they can answer those questions and find those solutions for you. However, some problems will come back to you as the owner. And of course, if you're managing your own project, they're all going to come to you. And so you need to be in a position where you can solve problems. And this is where experience definitely does start to help, because you really want to be understanding the full extent of the problem that's come to light and all of the potential solutions. Now, builders believe that in most cases, everyone wants the cheapest solution. Actually, that isn't always the best solution. That may not be the best solution for your long-term plan with the property, which is actually perhaps to hold it in your portfolio for the next 20, 30 years or so. And if that is the intention, you perhaps don't want the cheapest solution because the cheapest solution could break in the next 2 to 3 years. And that isn't right for you this time around. So you may want an alternative solution. And this again is why builders don't make the best project managers, because they don't necessarily look at all of the different options. They'll frequently just give you the quick, cheap fix that moves the problem on and effectively gets it away from them in the current at the current point of time. Project managers will generally come back to you with multiple solutions, the pros and cons of each. That cheap solution may be look cheap, but actually we need to do something that is now going to add a week onto the time of the project because it's nice and cheap, but the product we need isn't available for a week or something like that. A more expensive solution might be available off the shelf in the merchant around the corner and can be solved tomorrow afternoon. And these are the kinds of questions that project managers will find out for you and tell you, or you need to find out for yourself if you're managing your own project so that you can make the right decision. Only you can really make the decision. Your project manager can make some decisions, but realistically, none of your team should ultimately be making those decisions for you. Those decisions should come back through you. Your project manager will make some because you would probably have already agreed some parameters under which they can make some decisions for you. And then finally, the thing that the project manager will do, which a lot of people don't do, but the good project managers will evaluate your scheme upon completion. They'll give you some feedback as to how the project went, what you could learn, what they can learn, perhaps what some other members of the team can learn on the next project. When I was managing building projects, we always had a debrief on every single project. We would only debrief what we delivered on the project. Did we deliver it on time? Was our client delighted? Did we have any snags at the end of the day? Did we make money on the project? Could we have done something different? How can we learn so that on the next project, whoever that next client is, we can make it better? And if you're working with a project manager on a whole scheme, they will normally give you some kind of feedback. Not always. Sometimes that's a little bit tricky. I certainly work with some clients where the feedback could have been quite hard and not necessarily controversial, but I definitely worked on some schemes where my feedback could easily have been, do you know, I would never have bought that property for that price in the first place, because everything went wrong because it'd gone wrong from day one. I certainly did projects. The common bit of feedback I got when I was project managing, from clients asking them for their feedback on me and things, the common feedback I got was actually my clients telling me that they should have engaged me in the scheme earlier than they did, and that some of the challenges we had later on were because I hadn't been involved early enough on. A lot of clients thought they didn't need me before they had planning permission in place, but actually there was value I could bring at that early stage. There was involvement I could bring at that early stage that would have possibly ironed out some of the creases later on. So don't be afraid to evaluate. If you're the project manager, don't be afraid to evaluate yourself. Yeah, have sit down and make notes about what you could have done better for next time. How could you make the next project run more smoothly, and perhaps, within budget, or making more of a profit, or finishing earlier, or whatever. Be aware of things that go wrong so that you can improve later on. So those really are the principal roles of a project manager. And as I say, if you engage a project manager and it feels like it's running, you know, very, very smoothly, don't for 1 minute think that's because the project manager is doing nothing. The likelihood is the project manager is working very, very well in the background to make everything get delivered smoothly. And I think to some extent, this is why some people that I used to talk to when I was offering project management services, some people thought it was a really easy role to do, because if it was running smoothly, it was an easy role. Unfortunately, if things went wrong, it does become quite an onerous, time-consuming role. And I had some projects that were both ways. I had some that really just happened, everything ran smoothly. We had a good team, and things went well. I certainly had some where they didn't go anywhere near as well. It took up a lot more of my time, and the time of the people that were working for me doing project management for me back in the day when I had a bigger consultancy practice. The key thing, hopefully, you've got from this is that because there's involvement at a much higher level and your builder is just part of the team, this is why your builder can't actually be a project manager. And I do talk to a lot of property investors who say that they are using their builder as a project manager, but in reality, the builder's not engaged in the scheme early on. So they haven't got that holistic knowledge of the whole scheme. Builders generally won't manage your consultants. They will see that they're working for the consultants. So it's back to front effectively in a hierarchical position. So they won't drive consultants. Someone needs to drive consultants. Um, Builders generally won't look at problems holistically. So they will only give you one, maybe two potential solutions. They won't go off and do research there, into potential solutions. They won't necessarily. They might manage their own targets, and things, but they won't necessarily, manage the targets of anyone else. And if they miss their own target, they're not necessarily going to flag that up to you, that that they've missed a target. So you won't necessarily know about that early on. They won't necessarily be looking at all of the risks in the scheme. They'll be looking at the risks within their scheme, but then they're going to keep their cards to their chest in that respect. So don't. My advice is never try and outsource project management to builders. Builders will offer to take it on. When I was managing projects for builders, we would take it on if no one else was doing it. Now, we were a bit more of an established business than a lot of the builders you'll be working with. We had a sizable turnover. We were doing some big prestigious projects, and we would look after our clients. But I can tell you now, even though I was looking after my client and my client believed I was putting them first, I definitely wasn't. I was putting my business, my employer first, and letting my clients believe that I was putting them first. So from now, what I'm saying to you is if you are the client, you should be project managing your own project or engaging a project manager. Don't leave it to a builder, because a builder is not looking after your interests. If you need help project managing your own project and can't afford, or your scheme doesn't justify having an external project manager, then you're in exactly the right place. My business is all about helping property investors and small developers manage their own projects when they can't afford or don't need their own project manager. So listen to more of these podcasts. Check out my other resources, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's various other resources and various other ways that I can work with you. So hopefully this has opened up your eyes a little bit more and given you a little bit more knowledge about what you may well need to do if you are project managing your own scheme. I wish you all the best with that.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please do like, share, and leave a comment where you can. If you need any guidance or advice with anything to do with your refurbishments or conversions, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can book a free call with me by clicking on the link at the top of my website, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's other ways you can contact me in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.